Hello and welcome to another edition of Preaching Pointers, and I'm looking again at the subject of choosing a passage where you have been given the choice of what scripture passage to preach on. I've done a previous little video on this subject, and in that video we looked at the subject of making sure you make that choice early and you actually give yourself enough time to actually prepare the sermon, that you don't leave the choice to the last minute and thus find yourself with very little time to prepare your sermon. But in this video, I want to just look at some other factors which might come into play and have a bearing on the passage that you might choose to preach on. There are some of them on the slide here. So the date. It might be a special date. So you might be asked to preach on Christmas Day or Good Friday or Easter Day or New Year's Day. And if it's a special date, then that might have a bearing on the passage or type of passage that you choose. The occasion. Is it a special occasion? So as we've already touched on, is it an Easter message? Is it a Christmas message? Is it a harvest Thanksgiving message? Is the occasion a wedding, a funeral, or a baptism? Perhaps it's the induction service for someone, or a commendation service where someone is being commissioned as a missionary to service. So you might have all sorts of different occasions. And so if it's a special occasion, it might be a church's annual meeting or some special series of meetings, then that might have a bearing on the passage that you choose. The audience that you're faced with. What's the age of the audience? Is it children? Is it teenagers? Is it adults? And so that might have a bearing. What's their understanding? Are they fairly biblical literate? Or perhaps do they not know anything about the Bible at all? And if they don't know anything about the Bible at all, perhaps they need to hear a passage or be spoken to on a passage which teaches them the basics. What's the focus of the occasion or the audience? Is the idea that you are preaching evangelistically, or are you preaching primarily to build up the congregation in their faith, or the audience perhaps are Christians and they need to be edified in their faith? Something else that might have a bearing on what you choose is what you have been reading and studying. So it might be that it's not a special date or a special occasion, and so you've been reading and studying a particular part of the Bible, and God has been speaking to you through that, and perhaps it gives you an opportunity to cement what you've been studying and cement what you're reading and preach it, both for your own benefit and the benefit of the listeners. For myself, for example, if I'm asked to preach somewhere and it's not a special date or a special occasion, then I look at the next chunk of the Bible book that I'm currently working my way through and see if that's appropriate. And that helps me work my way through my book and get more familiar with the Bible and hopefully understand it better, whilst at the same time giving me a passage choice already made that I can pick up on and use. Another factor is the time available. If your request to preach is at short notice, then perhaps you might find there's no time to do a new sermon from scratch, and that you might need to turn to something that you've preached before or something that you've preached recently, which is fresh in your mind. And assuming it's appropriate, taking into account some of these other factors like date, occasion, and audience, then you might use that. I'm sure perhaps there are other factors that I've missed on this list. But here is just a starter for you, things you might need to bear in mind and consider when choosing your passage in order to prepare to preach. I hope this little video has been of some help to you. If it has, then please like it and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening.